Would I love if my dad and I were closer? There are no words. He was the first love of my life, but sometimes...
At 62 years old, Tatum O'Neal finally broke her silence about a painful moment that left many people shocked. She revealed why she wasn't allowed to attend her own father's funeral. For years, the world saw the glamorous side of Hollywood, but behind the fame was a complicated and heartbreaking father-daughter relationship between Tatum and her legendary father, Ryan O'Neal. What really happened during those final days? Why was she kept away at a time when the family is supposed to come together? In this video, we're diving into the emotional truth, the long history of their troubled bond, and the confession that has everyone talking. The story of the O'Neal family reads like a classic Hollywood epic, glittering with fame on the surface, yet shadowed by heartbreak behind closed doors. At the center stood Ryan O'Neal, a man whose golden boy charm and effortless screen presence made him one of the most recognizable faces of the late 1960s and 1970s. Audiences first fell for him on television in Peyton Place, where his youthful magnetism turned him into a household name. The leap from the small screen to cinema felt almost inevitable. On film, Ryan proved he was more than just handsome. His tender, heartbreaking performance in Love Story transformed him into a romantic icon and earned him an Academy Award nomination. He followed it with bold choices, starring opposite his own daughter in Paper Moon, delivering a sharp, layered portrayal that blended humor and vulnerability. He showed another side of himself in Stanley Kubrick's lavish period drama Barry Lyndon, embodying ambition and moral decline with quiet intensity. From sweeping romances to character-driven dramas, his career reflected both star power and surprising depth. But as his professional life soared, his personal world grew increasingly complicated. His first marriage to actress Joanna Moore brought 2 children, Tatum and Griffin. Yet the union unraveled amid struggles with addiction and instability. His second marriage to actress Lee Taylor Young added another son, Patrick, to the family. Later came his passionate on-and-off relationship with Farrah Fawcett, a love story as public and turbulent as any movie plot, and the birth of his youngest son, Redmond. While Ryan commanded screens, his children were quietly fighting their own battles. Tatum O'Neal became the youngest competitive Oscar winner in history for Paper Moon, but early fame came with high emotional costs and a strained bond with her father. Griffin and Redmond both wrestled publicly with substance abuse. Their struggles often splashed across headlines. Patrick, though more private, could not entirely escape the long shadow cast by the family name. In a candid reflection years later, Griffin spoke openly about the toll addiction had taken, describing a cycle of drugs, alcohol, and depression that seemed to grip the entire family. His words carried the weight of exhaustion, a man determined to step away from patterns that had defined so much of their story. Over time, reconciliation attempts flickered in and out, but peace often proved fragile. Public arguments, memoirs, and interviews exposed wounds that never fully healed. The O'Neal saga became more than a celebrity chronicle. It became a cautionary tale about the cost of fame, the fragility of family, and the invisible battles waged behind glamorous facades. Looking back, Ryan O'Neal's legacy is a complicated one. A gifted actor who helped define an era of romantic cinema, yet a father and partner navigating storms he could never quite outrun. The applause was thunderous, the spotlight blinding, but when it dimmed, what remained was a family still searching for peace in the aftermath of stardom. Few Hollywood relationships have felt as layered, fragile, and heartbreaking as the bond between Ryan O'Neal and his daughter Tatum. It began like something out of a storybook. In 1973, Ryan cast his 10-year-old daughter opposite him in Paper Moon. On screen, they were electric. A sharp-tongued con man and a wise beyond her years orphan drifting through the Depression-era Midwest. Their chemistry felt effortless, almost magical. Audiences adored them. Critics applauded. And then history was made. Tatum won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, becoming the youngest competitive Oscar winner ever. For a moment, it seemed like a father and daughter had conquered Hollywood together, but real life is rarely as tidy as the movies. As Tatum grew older, the fairy tale began to fray. The glow of early success brought pressure that few children could withstand. She was no longer just a little girl acting beside her father. She was a symbol of precocious talent, expected to shine just as brightly year after year. Behind the applause, she struggled with insecurity, with substance abuse, and with the emotional aftermath of her parents' turbulent marriage. Fame had come too quickly, and adulthood arrived before she had the chance to simply be a child. Ryan, meanwhile, was fighting battles of his own. Charismatic and talented, yes, but also wrestling with personal demons and complicated relationships. As the years passed, misunderstandings hardened into resentment. What had once been a shared triumph slowly turned into emotional distance. By the 1980s and 1990s, father and daughter were largely estranged. Tatum's marriage to tennis legend John McEnroe unfolded in the public eye, followed by a painful divorce and her own struggles with addiction. Ryan's long and highly publicized relationship with Farrah Fawcett brought additional tension into an already fragile family dynamic. Communication between them became rare and often filtered through interviews, headlines, and memoir excerpts rather than private conversations. In 2004, Tatum released her memoir, A Paper Life, recounting her childhood and her complicated relationship with her father. The book was raw and deeply personal, detailing moments of hurt and neglect as she remembered them. Ryan strongly disputed many of her claims, and the public nature of their disagreement seemed to deepen the divide. What might have been handled quietly became another chapter in a very public family saga. Yet, as with many Hollywood stories, there was an unexpected twist. In 2011, after more than 2 decades of distance, they agreed to reunite in front of cameras for the reality series Ryan and Tatum, The O'Neills. The show followed their attempt to reconnect after 25 years apart. It was not polished or sentimental. It was awkward, tense, sometimes painfully honest. Viewers witnessed 2 people trying to bridge years of disappointment and misunderstanding. There was no instant healing, no sweeping cinematic resolution, only cautious steps forward. In the years that followed, their relationship remained delicate. There were periods of warmth and visible effort, followed by setbacks and silence. But something had shifted. As Ryan's health declined later in life, reports suggested a softening between them. Tatum spoke of visiting her father, of conversations that felt more open, of a shared recognition that time was no longer endless. Their story never became the uncomplicated redemption arc some might have hoped for. Instead, it remained human, messy, imperfect, and deeply emotional. A father and daughter who once dazzled the world together spent decades learning how to face one another again. In the end, theirs was not just a tale of fame and fallout, but of 2 wounded people still searching, even late in life, for understanding and peace. As the final chapter of Ryan O'Neill's life approached, the spotlight that had followed him for decades flickered once more, softer now, tinged with inevitability. The man who once defined romantic tragedy and love story, whose charm lit up cinema screens across the world, was quietly fighting a far less glamorous battle. Congestive heart failure had weakened him, and the vibrant leading man of another era was now confined to a hospital room, his strength fading with each passing day. In those fragile months, it was his son Patrick who stood closest. Unlike his siblings, Patrick had largely avoided the turbulence of tabloid fame, building a steady career as a Los Angeles sportscaster. Over time, especially as illness narrowed Ryan's world, father and son had grown closer. Patrick became a calm, dependable presence, handling decisions, managing care, and shouldering responsibilities that come when the roles between parent and child slowly reverse. As word of Ryan's declining health reached the public, familiar speculation resurfaced. Would there be reconciliations? Tearful bedside reunions? The O'Neill family history had always invited curiosity. But behind closed doors, emotions were layered and complicated. Decades of estrangement and unresolved pain do not simply dissolve in the face of mortality. There were moments of connection, yes, but also silences shaped by the past. On December 8, 2023, at the age of 82, Ryan O'Neill passed away. The news marked the end of a life that had once shimmered with stardom and controversy in equal measure. This time, however, there would be no grand Hollywood spectacle. Patrick took the lead in arranging a small private service, intimate, restrained, and far removed from the glare that had so often defined his father's life. The chosen resting place carried its own quiet symbolism, Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, the same cemetery where Farrah Fawcett, Ryan's longtime love, had been laid to rest years earlier. In the end, after decades of headlines and heartbreak, the farewell was simple. No dramatic curtain call, just a final, quiet goodbye, a reflective close to a life lived brightly, imperfectly, and undeniably in the public eye. The farewell had been quiet, almost painfully understated. There were no grand Hollywood spotlights, no dramatic tributes echoing across the industry, just a small, intimate gathering where a life was honored and then gently laid to rest. But before the final echoes of that modest funeral service had fully faded, another wave of emotion swept in. News quickly spread that Tatum O'Neal, Ryan's eldest child, his former co-star, and once the bright-eyed little girl who stood beside him on an Oscar-winning stage, had not attended the ceremony. The revelation moved through Hollywood like a whisper that grew louder with every retelling, and with it came a flood of old memories. For many, her absence felt surprising, even symbolic. Tatum and her father had shared one of the most unforgettable father-daughter collaborations in film history. Together, they captivated audiences, their chemistry lighting up the screen and earning acclaim that few families ever experience. But behind the applause and flashing cameras, their real-life relationship was far more complicated. Their bond had long been marked by both closeness and distance, love and misunderstanding, a deeply human story that often unfolded under the harsh glare of public attention. In recent years, however, there had been small but meaningful signs of healing. Time, which had once widened the gap between them, seemed to be slowly softening it. There were reports of reconnection, cautious conversations, shared moments, fragile bridges being rebuilt after decades of estrangement. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just the quiet effort of two people trying to find their way back to one another. After Ryan's passing, Tatum released a heartfelt statement that touched many. She spoke openly about her sorrow, but also about gratitude. She expressed relief that they had ended on good terms, that peace, however delicate, had been found before it was too late. Her words carried warmth, honesty, and a sense of closure. To many, it sounded as though the storms of the past had finally settled into calmer waters. That is why her absence from the service felt to some like an unsettling contradiction. If reconciliation had truly taken place, why wasn't she there? Questions swirled. Was it a misunderstanding? A private family decision made quietly behind closed doors? Or was it yet another painful chapter in a relationship history that had always balanced between reconciliation and rupture? Speculation quickly filled the silence. In Hollywood, stories rarely remain private for long. Some viewed her absence as a final fracture, an unresolved note in a melody that never quite found harmony. Others believed there had to be reasons the public simply didn't see, and that may be the truest part of it all. Grief is rarely simple. It doesn't follow scripts, and it certainly doesn't perform for cameras. Families, especially those who have lived their entire lives under scrutiny, sometimes choose privacy over spectacle. In moments of loss, decisions are shaped by emotions too layered and too personal to fully explain. What appears to be distance from the outside can, in reality, be something far more complicated. Tatum herself did not fuel the fire. She didn't offer dramatic clarifications or public defenses. She didn't engage in controversy. Instead, she remained composed and largely silent in the days that followed. Her earlier words of love were allowed to stand on their own. And in that silence, there was something deeply reflective, almost dignified. No anger, no accusations, just the quiet weight of a daughter remembering her father in her own way. In the end, the controversy became yet another bittersweet note in the long and often turbulent O'Neal family saga. Their story had never been simple, never been cleanly resolved. It was a narrative shaped by fame, pride, heartbreak, reconciliation, and the fragile hope that love, even when tested, never fully disappears. And perhaps that is the most honest ending of all. Not a perfect one, not a neatly tied conclusion, but a human one. Even in farewell, their story resisted tidy endings, leaving behind not just questions, but the complicated, enduring truth of family.